Welcome, everyone. My name is Pilar Bonilla. I'm a brown woman with short black hair that is styled into a bob. I'm wearing a black shirt and have headphones in both ears. My pronouns are she, her, ella, and I will be your moderator for the rest of the evening. If you're comfortable, please share in the chat what school or program you attended or are attending, and if you work with or are a social work student intern. Now, on behalf of the P4P New York Coalition, we want to thank NASW New York for all the support they have shown us. Before we begin, I would like to share this land and labor acknowledgement with you all. Every community owes its existence and vitality to generations of ancestors from around the world. Some were brought here against their will. Some were drawn to leave their distant homes in hopes of a better life. And some have lived on this land for more generations than can be counted. Truth, history, and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all heritages and barriers of difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what history has buried by honoring the truth. We want to acknowledge that we are gathering from across the occupied and unceded ancestral lands of what is now called New York State, the land we are living, working, and fighting together on is stolen land that is the traditional and contemporary territory of many indigenous peoples. We honor the sovereign nations of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, and Tuscarora, who have stewarded these lands for generations. We also recognize the ancestral homelands of the Lenape people and other indigenous peoples with historical ties to this region. We acknowledge that the technology we use for this virtual gathering relies on infrastructure located on land with its own indigenous history, and we pay our respects to the indigenous peoples of those lands as well. This acknowledgement is not a final act, but a starting point. We encourage everyone to move beyond this statement by supporting Indigenous organizations, learning Indigenous history, and advocating for policies that uplift Indigenous communities. To learn more about the ancestral lands that you reside on, go to native-land.ca. The link will be provided in the chat for you. We also pause to recognize and acknowledge the labor upon which our country, states, and institutions are built. We remember that our country is built on the labor of enslaved people who were kidnapped and brought to the U.S. from the African continent, and recognize the continued contribution of their survivors. We also acknowledge all migrant labor, including voluntary, involuntary, trafficked, forced, and undocumented people who contributed to the building of the country and continue to serve within our labor force. We recognize our debt to exploited workers past and present, whose labor was and continues to be stolen through unjust practices. And finally, we recognize that we live in an exploitative, labor-obsessed society, and we pledge to keep on fighting to end the exploitation and continued dehumanization of people of color for the liberation of us all. Now, on to our presentation on the case for paid placements. Why we cannot afford to shut out future social workers. As for our formatting this evening, we will give you a short introduction about payment for placements, P4P, and the actions you can take to support what we're trying to accomplish. We will then introduce you to our panelists. This will be followed by a Q&A session where the panelists will have the opportunity to introduce the work they are doing related to unpaid internships. And we will then have some time where the audience can ask questions. Payment for Placements, P4P, is a national movement made up of students and alum dedicated to ending the practice of mandatory unpaid internships. The P4P New York Coalition is made up of several P4P chapters across New York State. We believe fair compensation is essential to making social work education accessible, diversifying the profession, and addressing critical workforce shortages. We advocate for legislative solutions to secure funding for placements, ensuring a stronger future for social services in New York. We hope that you can join us in thinking about this discussion from the framework of recognizing, reimagining, and rebuilding. In recognizing, we ask you to reflect upon the fact that there is a problem, that the problem starts at the student level with unpaid internships. Reflect on your time as a social work student. What could have helped you or hindered your success? On that note, we're going to pose two poll questions. Angelique, do you still have the questions?
Yes, give me one moment.
Sure. The first question: do you feel that getting paid for your internship would have helped you get through your program?
Okay, we're just waiting for a few more people to answer the question one, and we'll give it another moment.
Yep. So far, 98% have voted yes, which is unsurprising. Okay, the second question: do you think a paid internship would lead to a higher professional earning potential in this field?
Give me one moment, I'll post that question. Okay, we'll give it just another moment, but so far, 79%, 21% no.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for answering those questions. Fun fact: did you know that the National Association of Colleges and Employers research shows a significant advantage for students with paid internships? Students who were paid during their internships secure higher starting salaries upon graduation compared to their peers who had unpaid internships or no internship experience. Next, as the panelists converse, we ask you to reimagine the possibilities. Did you know that P4P New York is trying to pass a bill to get MSW students paid a stipend for the degree required internship? If you're interested in learning more, a link to Bill S.7894 will be shared with you in the chat. Finally, we invite you to join us in rebuilding. We will go into further details on our call to actions at the end. However, for those that may not be able to stay for the entire time, there are two things that would help us right now. Please, first and foremost, fill out our survey and register for Capital Action Day. Now on to our panelists. Senator Salazar has represented the 18th Senate District, much of North Brooklyn and a part of Queens, and Albany since 2019. She chairs the Crime Victims, Crime, and Corrections Committee, where she oversees all the prisons in New York State. Senator Salazar is a strong supporter of tenants' rights, criminal justice reform, equal protection for women, and immigration justice. Thank you, Senator Salazar, for your courage, support, and leadership on sponsoring New York State Bill S.7894. Our next panelist is Tyree Grant, LCSW, SIFI. Tyree Grant earned his Master of Social Work degree from Hunter College Silberman School of Social Work. As a licensed clinical social worker and psychotherapist, he possesses over 20 years of diverse experience across various environments, including hospitals, government agencies, and community based mental health organizations. With a strong background in the nonprofit sector, Tyree brings expertise in operations management, financial oversight, program development, strategic planning, and program management. He has held leadership positions in esteemed organizations and is actively involved in Hunter College's mentorship program, providing guidance to the next generation. Thank you, Tyree, for sharing your experience as a mentor and SIFI instructor and finding solace with the truth regarding payments for social work interns and becoming an advocate for change. Our final panelist, Olivia Watts, is a recent MSW alum of Hunter College Silberman School of Social Work. She leverages a unique journey from image consultant to legislative advocate and community organizer. This trajectory fuels her innovative approach to campaign strategy, community organizing, and narrative development. Olivia excels at mobilizing diverse stakeholders, building trust, and translating complex policy into effective legislative and social movement campaigns. She has a proven track record of securing legislative support, driving successful campaigns, and leading cross sector coalitions. Her work is rooted in the intersection of climate resilience and urban planning, dedicated to creating safe, affordable, and clean cities with a strong commitment to affordable housing for all. Thank you, Olivia, for your strong contribution and dedication to P4P New York's goals and missions. Angelique, would you mind spotlighting Olivia and Tyree as well?
She has. We're
They're
up.
both spotlighted, absolutely. Bilal, would you also like to be spotlighted?
No, because my screen isn't working. And I'm now on my phone. Okay, now on to our Q&A. Olivia, as a recent alum, how did unpaid internships impact your student experience?
So I recently graduated in December 2024, so almost a year ago, even though it feels like yesterday. However, I actually started my master's program in fall 2020. So it took me 4 years to graduate, and I was supposed to be a 2-year student. And I actually loved my field placements. My first year placement, it like was the training that I had signed up for, that I took out student debt for. Like it exceeded my expectations. It was honestly like what I had hoped for and dreamed of. Like when I applied for school, I learned so much there. Um, for context, I was a community organizing student on the policy track at Silberman. And I was like actually at my placement, I was actually organizing. I helped build 2 committees. I did a ton of base building. I ended up building campaigns with community residents. I even ended up being lead facilitator on a state legislative campaign that was like meeting weekly with like policy wonks and legislative staff and like a ton of coalition partners. We redrafted a bill. Like I was doing so much that I actually wanted to go to school to learn for. And I had such invaluable training there that I still meet with my first year supervisor. We actually meet weekly. We have ended up being really great friends. However, I was interning minimum 21 hours a week. Like that's a part-time job that I was not getting paid for it. And as a lot of you may know, organizing meetings are at night, similar to how this community engagement event is at night. So it wasn't just my days. And that was on top of 4 academic classes, so a full course load, on top of field supervision and field advisory. I mean, 4 classes itself, like literally people quit their jobs to go get their master's programs if they can, it demands so much of your time. And that's also on top of personal life responsibilities and stressors like making money to live. And I mean, even simple tasks like cleaning my dishes, going grocery shopping, cooking, like just being a human being, like forget it. Like there was no time. My personal life suffered, my relationships suffered, my mental health suffered, my academic trajectory suffered, I got really behind on my coursework because I could not give as much capacity and mental effort and attention that I needed to and that I actually wanted to, that I took out student loans and went further into debt to give to my classwork because I was working jobs and I was working an unpaid part-time job that was classified as an internship. And I loved it. Like I loved that work that I was doing. I cherish it and I value it. And I wouldn't go back and change a single thing except for getting paid. And I even consider myself one of the lucky ones that had a placement that was actually training me for the area that I wanted to work in. But again, I got really behind. I needed to make some sort of money to live off of. I had that little bit from student loans. I ended up taking out as much as I could. I had some saved. I was a career changer. I had some supports, like I figured it out, but at what cost? And this is not an easy thing for me to talk about. I was stretched really thin. So thin that I tried to put my academic trajectory, I tried to go part-time, but that would have messed up my placement and all the hours I had done. So I was supposed to graduate in May 2022. And then I got pushed to summer 2022 and then to fall 2022 and like onwards until December 2024. I just was so burnt out. And even though I loved what I was doing for free and I was so glad I changed careers, I, um, you know, I didn't end up, so my 2-year program turned into a 4-year program. And I know now that there's nothing wrong with that because life happens and there's no shame in that. And because there are systemic issues at play. But for 2 years that I was supposed to graduate and I didn't, between 2022 and 2024, this was hanging over my head so much. I had no idea if I was even going to finish my master's. I had to pay matriculation fees. I was trying to work any job that I could get. I was working in this space, but I was feeling so down on myself and so lost. And I had so much shame and around not finishing my master's program, even though I did have such an amazing training. So if my placement had been paid, if those hours at work had been paid and valued literally any amount, that would have changed my life. It would have helped my mental capacity to learn even more, to be able to take full advantage of the education that I signed up for and went further into debt for. The state of my mental health, the state of my physical health, my relationships, my loved ones, it would have allowed me to just survive a little bit better. So that's how unpaid internships impacted my student experience. It dragged it out to 4 years and it added a lot of unneeded emotional distress and exacerbated all of my life stressors. And just to wrap that up, like my personal story is just one example, right, of this systemic issue. It is a symbol of the barriers that unpaid internships pose, and it is not just me. And yes, it unfortunately took me a while to figure this out and to not internalize my experience as shameful or as a failure. But this is not just about my own individualized hardships. If anything, I recognize that I carry more privilege than other students' experiences. I'm white. This isn't just like one sad story of how it impacted me and my career and my life trajectory. I'm just one representation of all the larger ways that unpaid internships affect students and their education and act as a barrier to this profession. So
Thank you so much, Olivia, for sharing your story. Tyree, can you describe your personal experience with your internship and what led you to changing your opinion on payment for placements?
Um, Again, I just want to thank the P4P team and Senator Salazar for being part of this process and this experience. I want to thank Olivia for sharing that, her story. I just want to thank everybody for having the resilience to deal with the barriers that popped up earlier today. This is what we do. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. And um, so to give some context, without giving my age, I um I started off in my career in guardianship, Article 81 guardianship. And so when I started, I had the fortunate pleasure of enrolling in Hunter's OIR program, which at the time was their 1-year residency program. Because similar to what Olivia shared in her story, I knew that the expenses and the barriers that would come, and that was a barrier for me in terms of starting my social work career. I avoided it because of a lot of the challenges that and costs that would come with it. And so when Hunter proposed this program, I was fortunate after being encouraged by other social work professionals to enroll. And what this program allowed was for me to and other professionals who were already in the social service profession, right? No matter what their focus was, to essentially, you had individuals who were for lack of a better word, doing social work without the title. All right. And, we'll talk about title protection now, but that is something that definitely is an impactful variable in the profession. And so what this did allow was professionals to, they were accommodated to have evening schedules because they did work usually during the day. So the first year was very accommodating. Second year was a lot more of a challenge. And so what this did was allow students to use their site as their placement. And so I worked in guardianship, which was essentially a mandated population where individuals who were deemed incapacitated by the Supreme Court. I had caseloads of over 50. I had to go to court. I had to do heavy duty cleanings. I had to do hospitalizations, all while being in school full time, all while having to do paper and all while having to still maintain my, my employment responsibilities. And so it was, although it was a opportunity, it was still was a challenge. So initially, I got to run a group with some of my clients on my caseload. I did it with a bunch of men who were all experiencing different forms of anxiety. They all had different diagnoses. And so we fortunately had the pleasure of being trained by one of Silverman's professors who excelled at group work. And I was able to run a group just by taking a course over the summer. And so that was one of the great experiences at my time and my experience. And one of the things I was fortunately didn't have to worry about certain expenses at that time. And so my experience was more on the mentoring side, the counseling side, the educational side. For me, my experience, I was grateful to be able to actually practice. I was a clinical individual and families focus. And so I got to do that. I got to actually practice, clinical work, even though my position wasn't a quote unquote clinical position. I got to get guidance and mentorship from my field um, instructor. It didn't feel as if I was not learning or gaining anything from the experience. And so for me, initially my stance was conflicted because I also realized in researching New York City and their many various internship programs. I was a recipient of one of the earlier programs when I was younger. Metropolitan Museum of Art has a paid internship, which I participated in when I was much younger. And so I have been a recipient on that. And that was definitely impactful at my time, just in terms of my professional career. And so it was a bit conflicting for me to understand up until I got engaged with being a mentor to undergrads and also obtaining my SIFI. And I started to realize that the experience that students were having this generation wasn't the educational experience, wasn't the mentoring experience that I got, wasn't focused on learning about the profession that they were essentially paying to be trained in. It became more of students were having horrible experiences where they were at a placement and essentially doing nothing. uh, had students essentially, or the polar opposite, where they were essentially doing doing what a paid worker would be doing, right? But for free. Having a full caseload without any guidance, without any clinical supervision, and being expected to still meet those standards and not necessarily actually uh, uh, be protected. And as a SIFI instructor, there's a lot of effort put into ensuring there's an educational plan because it's supposed to be an educational process. And so that definitely turned my point, especially considering the cost of everything has gone up. The cost of education has gone up. The cost of getting to school has gone up. The cost of living has gone up. And unfortunately, the compensation for the profession has not gone up with the expenses, especially in this city. And so I was my stance definitely shifted when I started to actually see what was happening to students on the front line and students that I was actually mentoring. And so I was excited to have an opportunity to help advocate, for this cause.
Thank you, Tyree, for sharing your story. Senator Salazar, could you discuss the role social workers play in New York? Who is most impacted by the current social work shortage, and how unpaid internships act as a barrier to building the necessary social work workforce?
Absolutely. And first of all, thank you to both Terry and Olivia for sharing your experiences. It's really valuable. I'm sure it's meaningful and valuable to everyone here, but certainly for me, I'm not a social worker. I come to this with great respect and admiration and appreciation for the work that social workers do, including social workers who have previously and currently work in my office, including Julia Fetter, my committee director, who is on this call with us. But social workers are, as we know, in government offices, certainly like mine, and doing extremely important work as public servants, but also social workers are serving our communities every day on the front lines of a mental health crisis, and a crisis of providing and of failing to provide adequate care to people across the country. Social workers support families entering the shelter system, those who are seeking access to government services, support students and families as guidance counselors, mental health practitioners in prisons and jails. That's something that I've become acutely aware of and developed an even deeper appreciation of as the chair of the Crime Victims, Crime and Correction Committee in the state Senate, spending a lot of time with incarcerated individuals, their families, and social workers who provide care to these individuals who are incarcerated and to their families. Social workers are connecting people with really important resources every single day. I am not exaggerating or trying to be effusive when I say that social workers are doing truly life-saving and life-sustaining work. The communities that are most impacted by the shortage of social workers to meet the needs in our country and in our state, the communities that are most impacted are, of course, Black and Brown communities, low income communities, and LGBTQ individuals and communities. That's our neighbors who often lack access to critical social work services and are those who often need those services the most. We have seen especially a lack of social workers in community mental health settings, makes it harder for people to access care. Rural areas are very hard hit. I, of course, represent an as urban of a district as it gets in Brooklyn and Queens, but I know that that rural parts of New York State and other parts of the country, of course, are hit are particularly affected, disproportionately impacted by the insufficient number of social workers. Right now, with cuts to federal funding across the board to social services, we can reasonably expect that we'll need social workers more than ever. This need is only going to grow. So we have to invest in the social worker workforce right now, because I don't think that, unfortunately, I don't want to be cynical, of course, but I don't think we can really rely on the federal government in this moment to do that. And that makes the work that we are doing at state levels very important, perhaps especially important. And unpaid internships, as you all have already heard from people who have experienced this firsthand, unpaid internships are a barrier because people may not want to or simply truly unable to join an MSW program because they can't afford to take an unpaid internship to fulfill their degree requirements. These internships are they're jobs, right? But people may not have the privilege of going further into debt, taking on more debt, or simply may not want to, understandably, because they have to work an unpaid job just to complete their program. So yeah, it's a racial justice issue, a gender justice issue, and one that I'm very grateful that social workers have educated me about it.
Thank you so much, Senator Salazar. The next question is for any of the panelists. Are unpaid social work internships a racial justice issue? A gender justice issue? If so, why?
I mean, I can just jump in really fast. I think Senator Salazar just spoke to this a lot. I think it's both. I think it's a class issue. I think it's a socioeconomic issue. And there's a stat that we have that we can send out. I can't remember exactly where it comes from, but from 2024, that like the majority of social MSW students in the country, I think it was like 84% were female. So this field has been historically, a feminized labor, right? And the devaluation of this field, I think, is very much due to that. And I think continuing unpaid internships continue to devalue this field, particularly when it's being so divested from on a federal level. And yeah, it's absolutely a racial justice issue. Tyree, I don't know if you wanted to jump in, but I saw you unmuted yourself a little bit ago. But I think, similar to what Senator Salazar just said, like unpaid internships are gatekeeping this profession from low income backgrounds that are typically Black and brown, and like this profession desperately needs people from the communities that it serves most.
Yes, thank you, Olivia. Yeah, I agree with what you said, uh, and obviously what Senator Salazar was already hinting at in her last statement. This is absolutely, from my perspective, I believe definitely it's a socioeconomic issue that impacts race and gender. And it varies depending on everybody's individual situation. And so the fact that um, as you heard, me being an OIR program, I essentially had, two jobs, right? You're still required to meet a certain amount of hours. You still have to ensure that you're meeting those requirements. And so these are the things that definitely are important to keep in mind. For me, there was a time where, due to the expenses that I considered taking a year off. And fortunately, because I had financial support from my family, I was able to continue. But that essentially was I still had to take out loans. There used to be more programs in the past that used to assist students with payments to help balance out these things. There used to be more support, to make it more accessible and make it more reasonable for being able to be successful when it came to reaching that goal. Unfortunately, the more barriers have come up and more so financial. And so I've had peers who avoided pursuing further levels in this profession because of simply the cost. The cost of the licensing exams are expensive. The cost of, being able to be financially successful and be able to provide for their families. A lot of people will avoid pursuing certain positions that which would put them in higher areas, which would have a different impact and add more diversity to the profession, because of the fact that it's more expensive. There's more cost, and so having paid internships will definitely add a little bit more balance to the experience, to the profession, and give individuals more opportunities to be in areas that are not represented.
I'll just add, there isn't a lot for me to add to Olivia and Terry's responses. They're comprehensive, and I completely agree. I think the only other detail that I'll add is, as has been mentioned, because at least as of now, most new and aspiring social workers are women. Funding these unpaid internships would also advance the fight for gender pay equity across the spectrum. So, just yet another reason to support this.
I 100% agree. Senator Salazar, can you describe what S7894 does and what motivated you to become the prime sponsor of the bill?
Sure. So this bill would provide a stipend for MSW students, a stipend of $4,500 for their first 450 hours of their required internship for their degree program. In New York, students have to they have to complete their internship in New York State and have to agree to work in New York State in a social work capacity for at least 1 year after graduation, in this case, right? The bill would also require the Office of Mental Health to collect data on the program, including how this program is impacting, after implementation, Masters of Social Work enrollment trends, demographic shifts, retention, attrition in MSW programs, conference of degrees, and rates of people leaving programs if affected by this, hopefully improving as a result of paying people for these internships. Uh, Also would track any measurable impact on student debt and workforce retention, people actually choosing to work as social workers, and choosing this career after obtaining the degree. Um, and it would also, the OMH would need to, the Office of Mental Health in New York State would need to conduct a cost benefit analysis of the program and provide any policy recommendations to expand and improve the program, because again, it would at this point only be for the first 450 hours, rather than all of the 900 hours of their internship. Um, right now, this bill, as it's written, it would be universal. The only stipulation on the funding is that students who already receive funding would only receive this additional funding from the state, to complement, so that their total funding would be equal to $4,500, if that makes sense. Um, I chose to sponsor this bill because social workers can't. Well, first of all, I was educated about the issue by social workers, including social workers in my own office. Um, but I believe that people should be paid for the labor that they do. And I would love to see this expanded. I know I mentioned, as written, this would cover the first 450 hours. I I really want to see social work students and aspiring social workers paid for all 900 required hours of their internships. Um, there's a there's a real need. I know it's not unique to our state in New York, but there is doubtlessly a need and a growing need for more social workers to be trained in New York State, and especially those who are representative in identity and experiences of the populations who you are serving, they are serving. And paid internships would really reduce the barriers to entry.
Thank you so much, Senator Salazar. And I 100% agree with you. All students should be paid for every single hour of their labor. But this is also why it's a pilot program, because a bill like this has not existed in New York before. Even though they tried passing something like this in Texas. Come on, New York. Why are we so behind? Anywho, Olivia, next question. Are there examples of similar legislation in other places?
Yeah, so you brought up a great example of Texas, which when I learned about that, I was shocked that this sort of bill has been introduced in such a deep red state and then not here in New York. But about like 10 or 15 other states have similar pieces of legislation. So the issue and like the winnability of it feels pretty salient. In 2022, like Michigan's governor approved a program that compensates interns, MSW interns at public schools at $25 an hour. So a lot of the other pieces of legislation, actually all of the other pieces of legislation are all targeted in some way, whether it's a type of social worker, like the environment that they work at, or it is a demographic of social workers. So this piece of legislation really builds upon that by being universal. It's not just targeting one specific group or one specific type of student. So I think, in terms of New York being a leading voice on a lot of issues, particularly like we do have one of the most robust public services in the country. Like this feels very on the mark for us, and I think the other thing to point out here is that, like, in other professions, this idea of this piece of legislation has existed. Like, the most prominent example, I think, that everyone would know here is doctors. Like, doctors used to not be paid for their residency. And then in, I think it was 1965, the federal government passed for Medicare to, is it Medicare or Medicaid? Sorry, I'm going to get that mixed up a little bit. We can send out the stats after. They decided to fund it, and like the rate of doctors skyrocketed. And now being a doctor is, an extremely attractive field to go into. So, and then there was another more recent example in Maryland where they had a shortage of teachers. So they decided to fund that 1 year where they had to be like a student teacher. And I think they did a stipend of $20K. And they attracted, I think it has sorry, I'm getting a little mixed up, but the goal of the bill was to attract new teachers, and the results have been pretty resounding. So those are just two examples of other similar professions that has had really strong results. So this bill is not novel, like it's not a unique idea. It's pretty common sense, and yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. If it's okay with the panelists, we have the opportunity to go on until 7:45. NASW has been very gracious in extending the time. Awesome. Okay. Tyree, how do we uproot the ingrained attitudes of "it's always been this way" and "I had to do it, so why shouldn't you"?
First, I was asked who said that. Um, uh,
Oh, I could tell you.
um, in all reality, uh, not everyone is going to see things the way you see it. And I think as a clinician, and a social worker, this is something that happens a lot, right? And so everyone's experience shapes how they view things, how they view their environment, how they view, how they process information. And I don't believe this is any different. I think, there are no disrespect to Senator Salazar, but there are government entities that see this discussion, this topic, one way. There may be the educational institutions may see this topic one way, and so what we are doing is vital to essentially ensuring that other voices are being heard, and being able to understand that, just like we talked about barriers in life. And so how you think absolutely can be a barrier to someone else's success or access to resources or access to progress or survive. And so what we're discussing is just that. One of the things in school that they emphasize the profession is being quote unquote agents of change. And so I think we, as professionals, should absolutely live up to that. And I think what P4P is doing, what we're all doing here, is a prime example of change. Change is constant. And so, but also understanding that change makes people uncomfortable. And so I think being able to, what Senator Salazar mentioned earlier about being able to show and highlight the impact of not making this change or the impact that this change will have, I think is crucial to help reframing those individuals who may have been used to what's familiar, may have been used to, also the things that they may be feeling uncomfortable about, right? And so I do feel that approaching this clinically, right? And how do we help reframe, what we're our goal, right? How do we help show that it benefits everybody that we invest in this particular profession, and how that what happens if we don't invest in this profession, right? Some people don't see things from a micro perspective. They look at it from a macro. So, right, and so if they don't feel the impact directly or immediately, it may not be in their presence until it's too late. And so I think um, there's been enough impact to be able to say that that has sparked this change to say, if we don't make a change now, it could be even more harmful. And so essentially, I think what we're doing here is working towards being able to address that kind of thought process.
Thank you so much, Tyree. And you actually made me think of something. In school, we're taught that clients are the experts of their own experience. This is ingrained in us. This is actually a conversation you and I have had before. So, why don't students, as the experts of their own experiences, get the same treatment? We need to take the advice that is given to us and apply it to all. Now, Senator Salazar, how can we motivate elected officials to care about this issue?
I think I want to recognize first that many of you are already doing the work to motivate elected officials to care about this issue. I'm here I know I don't want to, I keep saying it perhaps ad nauseum, but um, I am here as an elected official because social workers, taught me about this and brought the issue of unpaid internships to my attention. um, People can, just to give some action items. People can call their senators and ask them in New York State to co-sponsor this legislation. The text of the legislation has been shared in the chat. Happy to connect with anyone on this call who's interested in advocating not only for this bill, but if you are in a state outside of New York and there is not existing legislation in your state to do this, we we can support you in advocating for legislators in your state to introduce legislation modeled off of this, or basically the same thing in your state, or adjusted to what your state needs. So call your elected officials and engage with them on this. And if you're in New York, ask them to co-sponsor this bill. Join the P4P campaign, or create a chapter if there isn't already one in your school. If you are a social work student right now and organize with other students to build support for this policy. Get the administration of the university to support the bill, or the administration of your social work program, and publicly advocate for it. I know that's easier said than done, but I believe it is worth trying. And collaborate with others who are advocating for this legislative agenda. And of course, connect with NASW about it. So that we are stronger when we grow our numbers, for advocating for this change. And I think that that we should be getting more constituents, not just social workers, of course, but those who understand the need for more social workers, for a more diversity among the social workforce. Get them to also advocate, call and email their elected officials. But like I said, I know that many of you are doing really valuable work right now to advocate for this change. And that includes sharing your personal experiences, as Terry and Olivia have done. So thank you for the work you're already doing.
Thank you, Senator Salazar. I think we're going to open up Q&A to the audience. And Angelique, if you can help me with this, because I'm on my phone and cannot see if somebody is raising their hand.
Surely. Absolutely. Shall I pause the recording or stop the recording? What would you?
You can pause it. Thank you. Going back to our framework of recognizing, reimagining, and rebuilding. In order for us to rebuild, steps must first be taken. If you're interested in learning more about our work or joining us, please fill out our survey. Also, our legislative bill S.7894 will be one of the priorities for this year's upcoming Capital Action Day. Please register and join us in going up to Albany on February 10th. Here is our information if you want to contact us or connect with us on social media. It is also being shared with you in the chat. This presentation will be shared with all the registrants as a PDF file. Thank you everyone for joining us today. A special shout out to our amazing panelists, Senator Julia Salazar, Tyree Grant, and Olivia Watts, as well as our P4P tech team, who have been dropping links in the chat, uploading files, and helping us organize this event. Thank you, Monique, Dan, Melissa, Abru, Maria, Anna, and everyone who was part of the P4P New York Coalition. A huge shout out to P4P National as well. None of this work could have been done without you. Last but not least, a hearty thanks to the NASW New York team for not only agreeing to partner with us, but for helping us make this presentation a reality. Thank you.